It was the night she'd feared for years. In the silence of the house, she heard the door creak open, footsteps that weren't supposed to be there. Her heart raced. It was time. Time for the punishment her relatives had promised since the day she was adopted. But what they were about to do, no one could have prepared her for. A loud knock echoed through the empty hallway. Her breath caught in her chest, as if the very air had thickened around her. She knew it was them. She had always known that one day they would come for her. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The house, once filled with the laughter of cousins, uncles, and aunts, now felt like a prison. The walls closed in on her. She had lived here all her life, but tonight, everything was different. The darkness outside seemed to seep into the room, turning the ordinary into something sinister. She slowly pushed the covers off her legs and stood up. The cold floor sent a shiver through her feet, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was fear. Fear that had been building inside her for years, ever since the day her parents had made the decision to adopt her. A decision that, in their eyes, had come with strings attached. She didn't remember her birth parents. The only ones she knew were the relatives who had taken her in when she was just a toddler. They had raised her, but their love always felt conditional. They took care of her, yes, but there was always an air of something unspoken, something unsettling. And now, she understood. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. She hesitated. She knew what was on the other side, yet, she couldn't bring herself to move. There had been whispers, stories told in hushed voices when she was younger. Stories about other children who had been adopted into this family, children who had disappeared or left without a word. They didn't stay. And the ones who did? They lived in fear. With a deep breath, she turned the handle. The door swung open, and the dim light from the hallway cast shadows across her room. Her relatives stood there, their faces unreadable. But she could see the determination in their eyes. There was no escape this time. "You know why we're here," her aunt said coldly, her voice sharp and final. She nodded, her throat tight. She didn't speak. What was there to say? The truth had always been clear. The promises made when she was adopted were never kept. Her relatives had always said they took her in out of kindness. But kindness had its limits. And now, she would pay the price for their goodwill. They stepped into the room, their footsteps heavy, as though they were walking on her soul. Her heart raced faster, but she forced herself to stay calm. There was no point in fighting now. No one would come to her rescue. She was alone. Her uncle, standing at the back, crossed his arms. His gaze was cold, almost calculating, as if he were deciding what to do next. Her aunt was the one who spoke, her words cutting through the silence. "You've been a burden to this family for too long," her aunt continued, her voice unwavering. "You don't understand the sacrifices we've made for you. You've taken advantage of our kindness, and it's time for you to face the consequences." The words felt like a slap. She wasn't a burden. She had never asked for this. She had never asked to be adopted, to be raised by people who didn't want her. But there was no point in explaining that now. It wouldn't change anything. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her aunt didn't answer immediately. She looked at her with a mixture of pity and disdain, as though she were a child who had misbehaved. A child who needed to be taught a lesson. Her uncle stepped forward then, his gaze hardening. "It's time for you to learn what it means to truly be part of this family," he said, his voice low but firm. "You need to understand what happens when you take things for granted. When you expect too much from others." She didn't know what he meant. What could they possibly do that she hadn't already endured? The constant judgment. The cold indifference. The isolation. But as her uncle stepped closer, she realized something. This wasn't just about punishment. This was about control. Her aunt, who had remained silent until now, reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly, as though savoring the moment. The paper was old, yellowed with age. She held it out, her eyes locked on the girl's face. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized the paper. It was an old family document. A record of her adoption. She had never seen it before, but she had heard whispers about it. It was a record of ownership. A document that proved she didn't belong. "We never wanted you here," her aunt said bluntly, the words slicing through her like a knife. "You were a charity case. A mistake." Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't speak. She didn't know how to respond. All her life, she had believed that they loved her, that they cared for her. But now, standing here in front of her, they had stripped away that illusion. Her aunt's eyes narrowed as she studied the girl's face. "You've lived here, enjoying our resources, our care. But now you will understand what it means to live without. You will pay for the years you've taken from us." Her uncle nodded, his face unreadable. "You'll leave in the morning. We don't want you here anymore." The finality of his words hit her like a ton of bricks. She had nowhere else to go. She had no family, no friends who could help her. She had been abandoned. Again. The door slammed shut behind them, and the sound of their footsteps faded as they walked away, leaving her alone in the darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The reality of it all was too much to bear. She was alone, betrayed by the people who were supposed to care for her. But as the minutes ticked by, something inside her shifted. A spark of defiance flared in her chest. They wanted to punish her, to make her suffer. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. She wasn't a helpless child anymore. She had survived on her own for years. She could survive this, too. And she would. She would find a way to get out of here. To escape the punishment they had planned. She didn't know how yet, but she would find a way. As the night stretched on, she sat in silence, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her. But within that silence, she found something else, a resolve. No matter what they had planned for her, she would fight back. She would not let them break her. And the next day, when the morning light broke through the darkness, she would leave. She didn't know where she would go, but it didn't matter. She would leave, and she would never return. The morning light barely touched the corners of the room, and still, she could not sleep. The night had been long and filled with a haunting silence that seemed to hang in the air, heavier than usual. Her mind replayed the events of last night over and over, each moment more surreal than the last. She had expected punishment, yes. But this? The cold indifference, the way they dismissed her like an object they no longer had use for, she had never imagined it could go this far. Her body felt stiff, exhausted, yet she couldn't bring herself to rest. Every nerve was on edge. Her thoughts were racing. She had to leave. There was no choice anymore. The family she had once thought of as her own had turned on her, and there was no coming back from this. The room was dark, save for a small crack in the curtains where a sliver of light tried to break through the gray morning sky. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window, lost in her thoughts. Her eyes lingered on the view, the same view she had seen for as long as she could remember. The same streets, the same houses, the same neighborhood that she had once considered home. Her phone lay on the nightstand, silent, a constant reminder that she had no one to call. No friends, no family beyond these walls. Her heart clenched at the thought of it. No one would come for her. The truth was clear. She was alone. The door to her room creaked, and her head snapped toward it. Her aunt appeared in the doorway, her face as cold and emotionless as the night before. "You're leaving today," she said, her voice flat. She nodded, though she didn't speak. What was there to say? The decision had already been made for her. She stood up, her legs unsteady, her heart beating faster with each passing second. It was happening. She was leaving, just as they had promised. But the weight of it, the finality of it, was more overwhelming than she had imagined. Her aunt watched her, her expression unreadable. "Get your things. You have 10 minutes. It felt like a dream, one that she couldn't wake up from. 10 minutes. It wasn't enough time to process what was happening, let alone prepare herself for what came next. She moved quickly, gathering a few belongings, things she could carry with her. Clothes, a small bag, and the only thing that mattered to her, her journal. The one thing she had kept close, the one thing that had always kept her grounded. Her aunt stood by the door, watching her with a dispassionate gaze, as though this moment didn't matter at all. As if it had been decided long ago that this was her fate. When she was done, her aunt motioned for her to follow. Without a word, she did. She had no choice. There was nothing left for her here. As they descended the stairs, the house felt even more suffocating. Each step she took seemed to echo in the silence. The kitchen was empty, and the dining room was still, as if frozen in time. The walls, once familiar, now felt like a foreign landscape. Her aunt didn't speak. The only sound was the soft shuffle of her footsteps behind her. When they reached the front door, her aunt stopped. She turned to face her, her eyes cold and sharp. "Go," her aunt said. For a moment, she just stood there, looking at the woman who had raised her, the woman who had been both a guardian and a jailer. The words, the finality of them, stung. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the betrayal. Everything she had believed, everything she had thought was real, had been ripped away in an instant. But there was no time to dwell on it. She took a deep breath, stepped outside, and closed the door behind her. The morning air was cool, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the house she had just left. She stood on the porch for a moment, unsure of what to do next. The world outside seemed so much bigger now. So much more overwhelming. She had always felt safe here, even with the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. But now, it felt like a cage had been lifted, and the vastness of the unknown stretched out before her. She turned around and glanced at the house one last time. She would never come back. Not to this place, not to these people. They had made sure of that. Her mind raced. She had no plan. No destination. Nothing. Just the overwhelming sense that she needed to get away. She needed to find somewhere, anywhere, where she could escape from the life she had known. She began to walk. It wasn't fast, but it was determined. Step by step, she moved away from the house, away from the life that had defined her for so long. The street was empty, as if the world had decided to give her space to breathe. The further she walked, the more uncertain the future became, but something deep inside her kept her moving. The need to survive. The need to find a place where she could start again. As she walked, her mind drifted back to the night before. The conversation. The document. Her aunt's words. She couldn't forget the anger in her voice, the way they had treated her as though she was disposable. But then, there was something else. A small, almost imperceptible shift in her thoughts. Her uncle's cold demeanor. The way her aunt had seemed almost pleased with the idea of her leaving. There had been a certain finality to it, but also a strange sense of control. It was as if they had planned this all along. The more she thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. Why had they treated her this way? What had changed? What was the real reason behind their cruelty? It didn't add up. And that was when the first seed of doubt was planted in her mind. What if this wasn't just about her being a burden? What if there was more to the story? She couldn't explain it, but something inside her whispered that she wasn't being told the whole truth. And now, with everything stripped away, she would find out. She would uncover the real story. As she walked further into the city, the streets became more familiar, the noise of the world more apparent. It was a strange contrast to the stillness that had settled over her just a few moments ago. But the question lingered in her mind, where would she go now? She couldn't go back to the only home she had ever known. There was no safety left for her there. She walked, without a destination in mind, just trying to put distance between herself and the family that had abandoned her. She didn't know how long she had been walking, but when she finally stopped, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. Her feet ached, her body felt heavy, but her mind was clear. She had made it this far. She had escaped. But there was still so much more to do. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she felt free. But deep down, something else stirred. A quiet, insistent thought. A voice that told her there was more to her story. That there was something waiting for her, something she had yet to discover. The streetlights flickered to life as the evening settled over the city. She had walked for what felt like hours, her body drained, her feet sore from the long trek. She couldn't remember the last time she'd stopped to rest, but her mind wouldn't let her. Thoughts of her family, of the cold words and cruel actions, consumed her. They were behind her now, but their shadow still loomed over her. She found herself in the heart of the city, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, unfamiliar sounds. The streets were busier now, the hum of people going about their lives. For the first time, she felt completely alone. The crowd didn't know her, didn't care. There was no one here to watch her, no one to judge her. It was the freedom she had longed for, but it came with a heavy price. She had no home, no direction. She didn't know where to go next. No money, no resources, no plan. Just the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. The streets were unfamiliar, but she kept walking. She couldn't stop. If she stopped, she feared she would fall apart. She had to keep moving. At some point, she passed a small diner, the kind that seemed to belong to another time, its neon sign flickering in the dusk. The hunger that had been gnawing at her suddenly hit hard. She hadn't eaten since the morning, before everything changed. She paused, looking at the diner for a moment, then pushed the door open and entered. The warmth of the diner wrapped around her like a blanket. She took a seat at the counter, her eyes scanning the menu as if she had all the time in the world. But she didn't. Every moment felt urgent, every decision weighed with consequence. The waitress came over, a friendly face with a warm smile. "What can I get you?" She hesitated, unsure. "Just coffee," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The waitress gave a nod and walked away. She let out a long, shaky breath, resting her elbows on the counter, her fingers trembling as they tapped nervously. The silence of the diner was comforting, but in the back of her mind there was a constant buzzing, a nagging feeling that something was off. Something wasn't right. Her thoughts returned to the conversation with her aunt. The way they had treated her, the way they had dismissed her like she was nothing. They hadn't just been angry. They hadn't just been disappointed in her. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment, planning it all along. And she hadn't seen it. She had always been told she was lucky to be adopted, that she should be grateful. But the more she thought about it, the more it didn't add up. If they had truly wanted to help her, why would they cast her aside like this? Why had they treated her so harshly? There was more to the story. She could feel it in her bones. She wasn't just some burden. She wasn't some mistake they had to deal with. There had to be something else going on, something that no one had told her. Her coffee arrived, and she took a sip, grateful for the warmth that spread through her body. The simple act of sitting there, alone, drinking coffee, felt like a small victory. But the victory was fleeting. Her mind was still racing, and the questions weren't going away. She had to find out the truth. She had to understand why they had treated her this way. As the night stretched on, she sat at the counter, lost in thought. The diner was quieter now, the evening crowd thinning out. She finished her coffee and stood up, slipping a few bills onto the counter, more out of habit than necessity. The waitress gave her a nod, but she didn't stay to chat. She was too lost in her own head. She stepped back out. Onto the street, the cool air hitting her like a slap. She had no destination in mind, no idea where to go. But one thing was certain, she couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. She wandered the streets aimlessly, her thoughts still spiraling. She needed answers. She needed to understand what had happened to her, why her family had turned on her, and why she felt so alone. She passed by an old bookstore, its windows fogged up from the inside, the faint smell of paper and dust seeping out into the street. Without thinking, she walked inside. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the warmth of the shop wrapped around her. The shopkeeper, an older man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, looked up from behind the counter. He gave her a quick nod before returning to his task, organizing a stack of books. She didn't know why she came in, or why she was suddenly drawn to the dusty old books. But something about the place felt comforting. Like it was hiding secrets, just like her. She wandered through the aisles, her fingers brushing over the spines of books, searching for something, anything, that would make sense of her situation. As she passed by a shelf marked History, something caught her eye. A book with a worn leather cover, its title almost completely faded. She pulled it from the shelf, turning it over in her hands. The Forgotten Stories of Our Family, the title read. She froze. Her heart began to race again. She opened the cover, the first page yellowed with age, the paper brittle. The book was filled with handwritten notes, details about families, people, names. And then, toward the back, there was a section about her own family, her adopted family. Her pulse quickened as she flipped through the pages. It was all there, the names of the people she had lived with all her life, the family she had been raised to believe was her own. But there were also things she didn't know, things that had never been spoken of. Secrets. The pages were filled with notes about adoption, about families, and about hidden truths that no one wanted to face. As she read, the pieces started to fall into place. She wasn't just adopted, she was a part of something much bigger, something far more complicated than she had ever imagined. Her aunt and uncle hadn't adopted her out of charity. They hadn't taken her in because they felt sorry for her. They had taken her in because it was part of a much larger plan. A plan that had been set into motion long before she was born. The truth began to sink in, heavy and cold. The family she had known, the family she had trusted, wasn't what it seemed. They had used her. And worse, they had planned it from the beginning. She slammed the book shut, her mind racing. She had to leave. She had to get out of this city, out of this life. There was no way she could stay in the place where she had been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. She rushed to the counter, her breath short and fast, and placed the book down on the counter. The shopkeeper didn't ask any questions as she hurried out the door and back into the night. As she walked back into the streets, the weight of the revelation pressed down on her chest. There was so much more to uncover. So many more lies to unravel. But she couldn't do it alone. She couldn't face this new truth by herself. She needed help. The only question now was, where could she find it? The city felt different now. Every street corner, every shadow in the alleyways, seemed like a reminder of everything she had left behind. The comfort she once found in the familiar was now replaced by an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. There was no safe place for her anymore. Not here. Not with them. She had to leave the city. She didn't know where she would go, but it was clear that staying here would only bring more pain, more confusion. The weight of the truth she had uncovered from that old book pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. Her adopted family had known more about her past than they had ever let on. They had a reason for taking her in, and it wasn't charity. It wasn't kindness. The only question now was, what was their reason? The answers weren't in the city. They were somewhere out there, somewhere beyond these streets, beyond the life she had known. But how would she find them? The thought of running away into the unknown felt both terrifying and liberating. She didn't know where she would go, but she knew she couldn't stay. Her mind raced with possibilities, with endless questions she needed answers to. And yet, no matter where she went, she could still feel their eyes on her, as though they were watching her every move. The words of her aunt echoed in her mind. "You have 10 minutes." Those words had been final, detached. There had been no care behind them, no compassion. And that had been the hardest part. She thought about her life before everything changed, the small moments that had seemed so insignificant at the time. Her aunt tucking her in at night, the sound of her uncle's laughter at the dinner table. She had been happy, or so she thought. But now, those moments seemed like lies, memories twisted by a reality she hadn't understood. The book had told her everything she needed to know, but it had only raised more questions. Why hadn't anyone ever told her? Why had they kept the truth hidden from her? She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been a part of something much larger than herself. Something that had been going on long before she was born. The book had mentioned families, hidden alliances, and agreements that spanned generations. And yet, there was so much more it hadn't said. The only person who could answer those questions was the one person she feared most, her aunt. But would she tell her the truth? Or would she continue to hide the secrets that had kept her in the dark for so long? She needed to know. She needed closure. With determination, she made her way back to the old house. The place that had once felt like home now felt like a prison. She had left it behind, but the pull to return was undeniable. She didn't know what she was hoping for, answers, perhaps, or maybe just one last glimpse of the life she had lost. The house was quiet when she arrived, its windows dark, the front door still locked. She hesitated before knocking. She didn't know how she would face them, especially her aunt. But she had to know. She couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. The door opened slowly, revealing her aunt, who stood in the doorway with an unreadable expression on her face. "You came back," her aunt said, her voice flat. "I need to know," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "Why? Why did you do this? Why did you treat me like that?" Her aunt's face flickered with something, fear? Regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You shouldn't have come back. There's nothing for you here." "Then tell me the truth," she pressed. "I deserve that, don't I?" Her aunt didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder, as though considering whether to let her in. After a long moment, she stepped aside and motioned for her to enter. The house felt colder now, the silence more oppressive than ever. It wasn't just the absence of warmth, it was the absence of trust, of everything she thought she knew. Her aunt closed the door behind her and motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table. "You want answers," she said. "But be careful what you ask for. Some truths are better left buried." "I've already found some of them," she shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "I read the book. I know about the families. About the plans. You're not fooling me anymore." Her aunt's eyes darkened, her lips pressed into a thin line. She took a seat across from her, her posture stiff. "You shouldn't have read that," she said, her voice low. "You have no idea what you're asking for." "I don't care," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "I need to know. You can't keep hiding from the truth. Not anymore." Her aunt hesitated, then let out a long, tired sigh. "You've always been so curious, so eager to understand the world around you. But you don't know what you're dealing with." "Then tell me," she insisted. "Tell me everything. I have the right to know." Her aunt's eyes softened, but there was a guarded look in them, like a wall had gone up inside her. She knew the time had come for her to speak the truth, but she was afraid of what it might do to both of them. "Fine," her aunt said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But understand this, I never wanted any of this. I didn't ask for you. I didn't ask to be your guardian. But the circumstances, they were out of my hands. I did what I had to do." "Then tell me what happened," she demanded, frustration boiling inside her. Her aunt stood up suddenly, pacing the room as though she were trying to find the right words. "You weren't just any child," she began. "You were part of something, something bigger than you or I could ever understand. And your parents, your biological parents, made sure of that." She froze. "What do you mean?" Her aunt stopped pacing, turning to face her. You were adopted because there were people who needed you. Not because they wanted to give you a family, but because you were a pawn in a much larger game. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. A pawn? She couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. You were the key to a secret, her aunt continued, her voice hollow. Your family, your real family, they weren't just ordinary people. They were part of a legacy, a bloodline that had been hidden away for generations. You were never meant to live a normal life. You were meant for something else. And when they found out, when they realized you had slipped through their grasp, her aunt's voice trailed off, as if the weight of it was too much to bear. She felt a chill run through her. What do you mean? Who are these people? What legacy? Why didn't you tell me? Her aunt looked at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and regret. I couldn't. I wasn't allowed to. It wasn't just about keeping you safe, it was about keeping you hidden. Hidden from who? She whispered, her voice trembling. Her aunt took a step toward her, her expression softening. There are people, powerful people, who have been watching you for a long time. They've been watching all of us. And they won't stop until they get what they want. Her heart pounded in her chest. What do they want? What am I supposed to do? Her aunt reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. I don't know what the future holds for you, but I do know one thing. You can't go back. And you can't run. They will find you, no matter where you go. You need to be ready for what's coming. The room felt colder now, the walls closing in around her. Her aunt's words were like a hammer to her chest. She had always thought of herself as ordinary, as someone who had been dealt a bad hand. But now she realized that the truth was far more complicated. She wasn't just an orphan, a forgotten child. She was the key to something far more dangerous. And someone, somewhere, was coming for her. She didn't sleep that night. How could she, with her mind racing, thoughts churning like a storm? Everything her aunt had told her, everything she had learned in that ancient book, was far more than she had ever imagined. There was a legacy, a bloodline tied to her very existence. The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. The questions only led to more questions, and no answers seemed to be enough. Her aunt's warning still echoed in her ears, you can't go back. You can't run. They will find you. She had tried to grasp what it all meant, but it felt like a jigsaw puzzle missing half of its pieces. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to fit the pieces together. Her aunt had said the people who were after her were powerful. They weren't ordinary people. Whoever they were, they had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to make their move. And now, she was their target. She had to act. The weight of the truth hung heavy on her shoulders. If she stayed, she risked putting herself in danger. If she ran, she might never be able to escape the shadows that were closing in on her. There was no easy choice, no clear path. But one thing was certain, she couldn't stay here, not under the same roof where secrets had been buried and lies had been told. The next morning, she packed her few belongings, clothes, a few personal items, and the book that had set everything into motion. It was all she had left of the life she once knew. But now, the book felt like a curse, a reminder of the dark forces that lurked just beyond her reach. She left the house in the early hours, before anyone could notice. The streets were quieter at this hour, the soft hum of the city still asleep. It was the calm before the storm. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stand the thought of being in that place a minute longer. She moved quickly, staying away from the main roads and the places she knew people would recognize her. Every step she took felt like a decision, a choice that could either lead her to safety or into the heart of danger. She tried to push away the fear, the nagging feeling that she was being watched. But it lingered, just below the surface, like a dark cloud. Hours passed, and she kept walking, her feet sore, her body exhausted. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. There was no time for rest, no time for hesitation. By midday, she found herself at the outskirts of the city, the familiar skyline fading behind her. She was almost out of reach, almost free. But there was a sense of dread that followed her. She knew the danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. She needed to find answers, but she didn't know where to start. The book had told her about her past, but it hadn't given her any clues about the people who were after her. Who were they? What did they want with her? As she walked through the deserted streets, her phone buzzed. She checked it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name on the screen. It was a message from her aunt. They know you're gone. You can't hide forever. They will find you. Stay in the city, for now. Don't trust anyone. Her blood ran cold. She had only been gone for a few hours. How could they know? The message was clear: stay in the city. Don't trust anyone. But it was too late. She had already left. And now, there was no turning back. She quickly pocketed the phone and glanced around nervously. The city had always felt like home, until now. Now, every street corner seemed to hold a threat, every face a potential enemy. She walked faster, the urgency building in her chest. She had to get out, get as far away as possible. She didn't know how they knew, or who they even were, but she wasn't going to take any chances. She passed through several neighborhoods she didn't recognize, moving deeper into the unfamiliar outskirts of the city. Her pace quickened as the minutes stretched on. She didn't want to be followed. She didn't want to be caught. But the streets were getting emptier, quieter. She felt like she was disappearing into the city, like she was becoming a ghost in the crowd. And then, just as she was about to turn a corner, she saw it. A black van. It was parked on the side of the street, its tinted windows almost completely obscured from view. But there was something about it that made her stop in her tracks. A chill ran through her. She knew something was wrong. She ducked into an alleyway, her breath coming in short, fast bursts. She leaned against the cold brick wall, her heart pounding in her chest. The van hadn't moved, but she couldn't risk being seen. Not now. She waited, her eyes fixed on the van, her body tense with fear. Every second felt like an eternity. Time seemed to slow as she watched, waiting for any sign that someone was inside, watching her. Then, a man stepped out from behind the van. He was tall, his face hidden in the shadows, but there was something about him that made her blood run cold. He was looking directly at her. The panic hit her instantly, her legs moving before her mind could catch up. She bolted, running down the alleyway, weaving between the narrow passages, desperate to get away. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear footsteps behind her, growing louder, closer. They were coming for her. She rounded another corner and found herself at a dead end. The alley was blocked off by a high metal fence. There was no way out. She spun around, her eyes scanning frantically for any escape route. The man was getting closer, his footsteps steady and sure. He was almost there. Her heart raced as she backed up against the fence, her breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. There was no time to think, no time to plan. The man was almost upon her. But then, just as she thought she was done for, a voice called out from the shadows. Get in. She whipped around to see a woman, standing just outside the alley, motioning for her to hurry. Without thinking, she ran toward the woman, who pulled her into a small, nondescript car parked nearby. The door slammed shut behind her as the engine roared to life. The woman glanced over at her, her eyes sharp and focused. You're lucky I saw you, she said. They're after you. You need to come with me. She didn't question it. She didn't have the time. The man who had been following her was getting closer, but now, they were moving fast. The car sped off, the city's skyline quickly disappearing in the rearview mirror. Who are you? She asked, her voice trembling. The woman didn't answer immediately. She kept her eyes on the road, her hands gripping the wheel with a firm, steady resolve. I'll explain everything, she said after a long pause. But right now, we need to get you out of here. The car turned onto a narrow road, the city's bright lights fading behind them. The unknown lay ahead, but for the first time in days, she felt a sliver of hope. She was no longer alone. For the first time, she had someone on her side. But she knew the danger wasn't over. The chase was only beginning. The car sped through the winding streets, its tires kicking up dust as the city disappeared behind them. She glanced over at the woman who had rescued her. Her eyes were hard, unreadable, but there was something about her calm demeanor that made her feel slightly less afraid. She had no idea who this woman was, or why she had stepped in to save her, but for now, she was grateful. The woman kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The silence between them was thick, and she knew there was more to this story than she had been told. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of driving, the car slowed, and the woman turned down a narrow dirt road. It was a far cry from the bustling city streets, and everything about it felt different, off the grid, almost hidden. The kind of place where secrets could be kept. They pulled into a secluded driveway, hidden by trees and overgrown shrubs. The house in front of them was old, with a peeling white facade and a long, creaky porch. It looked abandoned, but there was a sense of safety here, an undeniable feeling of isolation. The woman turned off the engine and glanced over at her. "We're safe here, for now." She didn't know what to say. She was still trying to process everything that had happened over the last few days, the shocking truths, the escape, the endless questions about her past. She needed answers, but the woman beside her wasn't speaking. "Who are you?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. "And why are you helping me?" The woman exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening on the steering wheel. "I think it's time you knew," she said quietly. "But you won't like it." "What do you mean?" "You don't know who's really after you," the woman replied, her voice grave. "And I don't think you're ready to hear it." "I need to know," she pressed, her tone more urgent than she intended. "I need to understand everything. I can't go on like this, not knowing what's happening." The woman nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. She turned off the car and opened the door, motioning for her to follow. "Come inside. It's better if we talk somewhere safe." They walked into the house, the air heavy with dust. It smelled like old wood and forgotten memories. The woman led her through a narrow hallway and into a small living room with mismatched furniture and a single lamp that lit the room in a soft, dim glow. She motioned for her to sit on the couch. "I was hired to watch over you," the woman said, finally breaking the silence. "But it wasn't just a job. I've known about you for a long time. Your past, your family, the secrets they've kept hidden. I knew the day would come when you'd find out, and I knew I'd have to protect you." "Protect me from what?" she asked, still struggling to understand. The woman paused, her eyes softening. "From them. The people who are after you." She leaned forward, trying to absorb every word. "Who are they? What do they want with me?" "They want what you are," the woman said quietly, her gaze unwavering. "You're not just any ordinary person. You're the last of a bloodline that holds power, power they want for themselves. Your biological family wasn't just a family. They were part of something much bigger, something ancient. They were guardians of a secret, a power that has been passed down for centuries. And you're the key." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. She had always felt different, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She had been raised to believe she was just a girl with no past, no history. But now she was learning that she was more than that. She was the descendant of something powerful, something dangerous. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "How could I not know? Why didn't anyone tell me?" The woman stood up and began pacing the room. "Your family hid the truth from you. They knew you were special, but they also knew you were in danger. The people who are after you, they've been hunting your family for generations. They believe that whoever controls the bloodline controls the power. And now that you've discovered the truth, they'll stop at nothing to get to you." She felt a wave of nausea. "But why? Why me? I don't even know how to control any kind of power." The woman stopped pacing and turned to face her. You don't need to understand it all right now. What matters is that you are the last one left. The last of the bloodline. They won't rest until they find you and take what's yours. She felt her heart racing again. Fear, confusion, anger, it all churned inside her. She had thought she was running from a family that didn't care, from a past that was lost. But now she realized her past wasn't lost. It had been stolen. Hidden. And now, it was threatening to destroy her. So, what am I supposed to do? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. How do I stop them? The woman met her gaze with a look that held both sympathy and resolve. You can't stop them on your own. But I'm here to help you. I have connections, resources. People who are fighting against them. People who want to keep the truth hidden. If you trust me, I can help you figure out what to do next. She sat there for a long moment, processing the gravity of what she had just learned. The truth was more complicated, more terrifying than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just running from the shadows of her past. She was running from a legacy, a dangerous, powerful legacy that was now her responsibility. How do I know I can trust you? She asked, her voice shaky. The woman smiled faintly, though her eyes were tired. You don't. But you don't have many options left. She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. Trust. It had always been so hard for her. But now, in this moment, it felt like the only choice. All right, she said finally. I'll trust you. The woman seemed to relax, a flicker of relief in her expression. Good. You're not alone in this. But you need to know something, if you want to survive, you'll need to fight. You can't run forever. A chill ran down her spine at the thought. She had been running her entire life, hiding from the truth, from the people who had hurt her. But now, there was no more running. There was only the fight. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. But she didn't have a choice. The woman led her to a back room of the house and handed her a small, worn box. It was simple, nothing extraordinary about it, but there was something about it that felt important. She opened it, revealing a stack of old papers, documents, and photographs. The contents were mostly in a language she didn't recognize. This is your family's legacy, the woman said, her voice quiet. Your parents left this for you. It will tell you everything you need to know. Her hands trembled as she began to sift through the papers, her mind still reeling from everything she had learned. Each document seemed to confirm what the woman had told her: she was part of something ancient, something dangerous. The papers detailed her family's history, their connection to a secret order that had guarded powerful knowledge for generations. And now, it seemed, the order was at war with those who wanted to control that power. She turned the pages, her eyes growing wider with each new revelation. There was no turning back now. The truth had been uncovered, and with it came a new, terrifying reality. She had a responsibility now, not just to herself, but to the legacy of her ancestors. The woman stood in the doorway, watching her. Are you ready? She asked. She looked up from the papers, meeting the woman's gaze. She wasn't sure what came next, but one thing was certain: she was no longer a pawn. She was the one in control of her destiny now. Yes, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready.